After discovering that her boyfriend is the son of her father's killer and that she's pregnant, she has no choice but to hold back her pain and write him a breakup letter through tears. Mingyu rushes to Nancy's house, only to find it completely empty. After looking around, he spots the letter on the table. A sense of dread immediately washes over him. He walks over nervously, hesitating for a long time before finally picking it up and opening it. Seeing the tear stains clearly marked on the paper, Mingyu doesn't need to guess what kind of despair Nancy was in when she wrote it. He immediately rushes back home and demands to know what his parents did to Nancy. They insist they did nothing. Of course, Mingyu doesn't believe his father, but he still calls John and asks to meet him on the rooftop, hoping to find out where Nancy is. John arrives at the rooftop, furious, making no effort to hide the killing intent in his eyes as he strides straight toward Mingyu. He swings his fist and lands a heavy punch, but Mingyu doesn't fight back. John hits him again, then grabs him by the throat and slams him against the edge of the roof, intending to strangle him to death right there. But Mingyu says that without Nancy, he'd rather die anyway. Those words make John hesitate. Only then does John realize that Mingyu truly loves Nancy. At the same time, memories of their past interactions begin to surface in his mind. Thinking it over, John finally softens and lets go. He knows Mingyu isn't a bad person at heart, and in the end, he's just another victim, someone oppressed and used by Xiao Boyan. Taking a few deep breaths to steady himself, John turns to leave, but Mingyu calls out again, desperately begging him to tell him where Nancy is. John tells him to stop looking for her, then walks away without looking back. The girl, pregnant out of wedlock, goes to the hospital to have an abortion, but after thinking it over, she can't bring herself to go through with it. It is, after all, a life. Just as the doctor is about to administer anesthesia, she quickly stops them, saying she doesn't want the procedure anymore. She then pulls out the needle from her arm and gets up to run away. Nancy is terrified that her two brothers will blame her. Not only is she pregnant before marriage, but the child she's carrying belongs to the family of the man who killed their father. So she hides in a corner and watches for a while. When she realizes her brothers aren't paying attention, she quietly slips away. Meanwhile, completely unaware of what has happened, John and Alex rush over to the doctor as soon as they see them come out, anxiously asking about their sister's condition. That's when they learn Nancy never went through with the procedure. Both of them are shocked and immediately panic, running out to look for her, but she's nowhere to be found. At that moment, Nancy is already in a taxi, tears streaming down her face. She knows that keeping this child would betray her deceased parents and her brothers, but she just can't bring herself to do it. All she can do is repeat "I'm sorry" over and over again. What she doesn't realize is that her silent disappearance has driven Alex and John nearly insane with worry. They search everywhere she might have gone, but there is no sign of her. At this point, they are terrified she might do something reckless, blaming themselves for everything. Just as they are consumed with regret, a phone suddenly rings. Alex quickly answers it, and upon hearing Nancy's voice, he finally breathes a sigh of relief. He tells her that they're not angry with her at all. John then takes the phone and carefully asks where she is, saying he'll drive over to pick her up. But Nancy tells them she needs a few days to calm down. At first, Nancy doesn't go far. She sits alone on a rooftop, lost in thought, as memories of what Mingyu once said come flooding back. Looking at the engagement ring in her hand, she takes it off and raises her arm, about to throw it away. But in the end, she can't bring herself to do it. Just then, she suddenly sees Mingyu, drunk and staggering, heading in her direction. Startled, Nancy quickly wipes the tears from her face and hides, while Mingyu cries out her name in anguish into the distance. The girl was pregnant. To avoid being found by anyone, she traveled to a remote coastal town to seek refuge with the wealthy matriarch she had once served. When the matriarch saw her, her face immediately lit up with surprise and delight. It turned out the two had been corresponding all along and knew each other's addresses. But the matriarch never imagined Nancy would actually come, so she immediately had the housekeeper prepare a lavish feast to welcome her. Although Nancy had hidden her sadness from the moment she walked in, the lady could tell at a glance that something was troubling her. Knowing Nancy well, she recognized that whenever Nancy was upset, she would eat voraciously. Nancy initially tried to deny it, but when the lady mentioned Mingyu, she could no longer hold back her grief and burst into tears, throwing herself into the lady's arms. Meanwhile, after searching for Nancy in vain for days, Mingyu had been holed up in his apartment drinking. When Xiao Boyan and his wife arrived and witnessed the scene, their reactions differed. Mingyu's mother's first instinct was pity, but Xiao Boyan was furious that his son had sunk so low. Mingyu's mother tried to take him home, but he refused. Seeing this, Xiao Boyan asked his wife to step outside for a moment. He wanted to speak with Mingyu alone. Once his wife had left, Xiao Boyan immediately pulled back the curtains. The blinding sunlight was unbearable for Mingyu, who had been confined to a dim room for days. At that moment, Xiao Boyan dropped all pretense. He pulled up a stool and sat directly in front of Mingyu, then admitted outright that he was the one who had driven Nancy away. Seeing Mingyu's reaction, Xiao Boyan knew he had achieved his goal, so he stood up with a satisfied expression and left. Mingyu was indeed enraged, and his hatred for his father reached its peak. Just as he was about to lose control and his sanity, Nancy's face suddenly flashed through his mind. So Mingyu placed both hands over his ears, murmuring Nancy's name over and over, as if she were right beside him. He forced himself to pull himself together and vowed silently that he would never again let his father push him around. He had to become stronger, because only then, once he found Nancy, would he have the strength to protect her. The girl comes to sing at a newly opened bar, but since it's her first time performing on stage, the moment the spotlight hits her and she sees the large crowd below, she suddenly becomes nervous and freezes in place, unable to make a sound. The audience quickly starts to boo and shout, demanding the bar replace her, which only makes Nancy more afraid to face them, and she turns around in panic. The manager is on the verge of losing it, quickly ordering the staff to turn off the lights and preparing to go up and pull Nancy off the stage. The moment a clear and melodious voice rings out, the restless crowd instantly falls silent, realizing how beautiful Nancy's singing is. She finally overcomes her fear and begins to perform for the audience, combining her singing with dance. The lively melody, energetic moves, and Nancy's youthful, radiant appearance leave everyone impressed, including the deputy mayor of Seoul. After finishing, Nancy hurriedly bows to the audience and runs backstage. Only then, led by the deputy mayor, does the crowd burst into applause and cheers for her outstanding performance. The long-single deputy mayor even finds himself unexpectedly captivated by Nancy. But Nancy has no idea about any of this. Back in the dressing room, she quickly removes her wig and starts packing out, worried that the bar management will come scold her for ruining the performance. She doesn't even think about asking for her pay and rushes out of the bar without even changing her clothes. She then hails a taxi on the street and leaves without looking back. The bar owner recognizes Nancy's talent and wants to sign her as a regular performer. When he hears that she's already left, he immediately orders the manager to find her at all costs. Since Nancy was only a temporary hire and didn't leave any contact information, the manager has to go through quite a bit of trouble before finally locating her at a shoe store where she works. When Nancy sees the manager and the owner, she assumes they've come to demand compensation for messing up the performance that night. When the manager explains that the owner actually wants to sign her to an exclusive contract, Nancy's face lights up with surprise, unable to believe it's real. However, the owner tells her that if she works for him, she must keep her personal life in order and asks if she can do that. Nancy's smile freezes for a moment as she quietly hides the pair of children's shoes she's holding behind her back, then nods without hesitation and agrees. The owner immediately has the manager bring out the contract, and they sign it with Nancy on the spot. A man goes into a shoe store to buy a pair of dress shoes, but while trying them on, he suddenly realizes there's a hole in his sock. The saleswoman can't hold back and bursts out laughing, leaving him extremely embarrassed. He quickly pulls his sock up, and at that moment he feels like the saleswoman looks familiar, so he asks if they've met somewhere before. Nancy is taken aback for a second and carefully studies his face, but she can't recall ever seeing him before. A trace of disappointment flashes in the man's eyes. In fact, he has already recognized that Nancy is the singer who performed on stage at the bar's opening a few days ago, but seeing that she doesn't remember him, he chooses not to say anything more and simply buys the shoes she recommended without hesitation. The next day, Boss Lou resigns Nancy from her job at the shoe store and takes her to a high-end restaurant for a meal. She believes that to become an outstanding singer, it's not enough to just practice singing and dancing. Etiquette and image are equally important. But Nancy has been carefree and unrestrained since childhood, and she can't change her habits overnight. This makes Boss Lou very angry, and she scolds Nancy for her crude table manners. She then earnestly tells Nancy that as a future star, every move she makes will be closely watched, so she must not easily reveal her emotions and must maintain a sense of mystery at all times. She shouldn't even smile casually, not even a slight smile, if she wants to become a truly elegant woman. After hearing this, Nancy says she understands. But this is only the beginning. In her spare time, she also needs to read to broaden her knowledge, yet whenever she opens a book she gets sleepy and ends up dozing off. Unfortunately, Boss Lou walks in right at that moment and catches her. She walks up to the table, flips through the book, and angrily questions Nancy, asking why she still hasn't finished the book she was told to read the day before. At this point, Nancy can't hold it in anymore and asks whether being a singer isn't just about singing well. Boss Lou finds this both frustrating and amusing, but she doesn't have the heart to keep scolding her. Soon, the day of the recording session arrives, and Nancy performs exceptionally well. Her solid vocal foundation combined with her sweet, captivating voice earns praise even from the recording engineer. A few days later, to promote the record and boost Nancy's visibility, Boss Lou has the manager take Nancy to meet a TV station producer, hoping to get his approval to have the song played on the radio. However, after taking the record, the producer doesn't even bother listening to it. Instead, he keeps staring at Nancy and then asks her to stand up. In order to boost her popularity and become a singer, the girl arranges a meeting with a TV producer. The producer orders Nancy to come sit next to him. Although she feels uncomfortable, she goes along with it because of his status. But the moment she sits down, he puts his arm around her and tells her to pour him a drink. With no choice, Nancy does as she's told, but she doesn't expect that her tolerance only makes him more brazen. Unable to endure the humiliation any longer, Nancy bursts into tears and runs out of the room. Seeing Boss Lou standing outside, she tearfully tells her that she no longer wants to be a singer and wants to give up. After hearing this, Boss Lou slaps her on the spot. This scene happens to be witnessed by the deputy mayor. Boss Lou tells Nancy that if she truly wants to give up, she won't stop her, but Nancy hasn't done anything wrong, so why should she run away like a criminal? She tells Nancy to go back inside and retrieve the record herself, declaring that if it's going to be thrown away, she will be the one to do it. Gathering her courage, Nancy returns to the room, walks straight to the table, takes back the record, and scolds the producer, telling him he has no right to listen to her songs. Feeling humiliated, the producer immediately stands up and is about to teach Nancy a lesson, but Boss Lou strides in confidently from outside. At this point, Nancy is using the stage name Soo Young. Boss Lou boldly tells the producer that within a year, the name Soo Young will be famous across the entire country, and by then he will realize just how poor his judgment was. She then takes Nancy and prepares to leave. Furious, the producer shouts threats, saying he will make sure Nancy can't survive in this industry. Boss Lou pays him no attention and, after stepping out, reminds Nancy once again that while it's important to be humble, she must never lose her self-respect. The next day, the deputy mayor goes to the TV station and reports the producer's misconduct to the station director. Taking it very seriously, the director immediately summons the producer and fires him on the spot in front of the deputy mayor. The producer doesn't dare argue and quickly leaves. Satisfied with the outcome, the deputy mayor then takes Nancy's record out of her pocket and hands it to the director, claiming that Nancy is her niece and asking him to give it a proper listen. With the deputy mayor's strong support, Nancy's record begins to be played repeatedly on radio stations. However, reality doesn't turn out as hoped. Sales of her record are extremely poor, and some people even return it after buying buying it. But Nancy doesn't get discouraged. She takes her records to the streets and sells them herself, personally recommending them to passers-by and asking them to give her music a chance. She even disregards her image, changing into her performance outfit and singing on the street. Her beautiful voice quickly draws a large crowd, and many records are sold, which only motivates Nancy to perform even more passionately. Completely unaware, Mingyu is at that very moment making his way toward her. The girl is performing on the street, promoting and selling her own albums, when she suddenly turns around and spots her ex-boyfriend, whom she hasn't seen in 4 years. Startled, she quickly turns away, but Mingyu still notices her and even stops walking. The person he has been desperately searching for is right in front of him, yet he doesn't recognize her at all and simply turns around and gets into his car. Nancy waits for a moment, and only after hearing the car engine start does she slowly turn back. Watching Mingyu drive away through the car window, her eyes are filled with reluctance and longing. It's not until the car completely disappears from sight that Nancy finally can't hold back her tears. Meanwhile, since Nancy didn't show up for vocal practice, boss Ryu goes to the dance studio to look for her, only to find it empty. This makes her furious, thinking Nancy skipped out to slack off. Just then, Nancy returns with her manager and friends, chatting and laughing. The moment they see boss Ryu, they all realize they're in trouble and, like kids who've done something wrong, walk up to her, waiting to be scolded. After learning that Nancy spent the entire afternoon performing on the street to sell her albums, boss Ryu's anger subsides somewhat, but she still disapproves of Nancy's actions, believing that street performing damages her image. She calls Nancy into her office for a private talk, telling her that a star should never beg people to pay attention to them. Instead, they should make people want to watch them. Even though Nancy's album isn't selling well right now, it's not a big deal. She bluntly says that the time Nancy spends selling albums on the street would be better used on building her image, which is what she truly wants to see. But Nancy insists that she doesn't want to rely on boss Ryu and wants to challenge herself using her own strength, so she asks for permission to continue selling albums on the street. Seeing how determined she is, boss Ryu reluctantly agrees to give her 1 month, but also makes it clear that if Nancy fails to produce good results, she will give up on her. With that, she stands up and leaves. From then on, Nancy goes out to the streets every day, performing while selling her albums, and gradually, her popularity begins to grow. However, achieving widespread fame in just 1 month through this alone is still extremely difficult. Unexpectedly, at that moment, the vice mayor happens to pass by. He even squeezes into the crowd and buys one of her albums. Seeing how hard Nancy is working to succeed, even putting aside her pride to perform on the street, the vice mayor shows a hint of admiration in his eyes. Deeply impressed by her courage, he quietly decides to lend her a helping hand. Unaware of all this, Nancy returns to the office, where her manager is holding a bouquet of flowers and a box, excitedly telling her that someone sent them and urging her to open it. Surprised, Nancy opens the box and finds an imported nutritional supplement that clearly looks very expensive. Not only that, there's also an unsigned card in the flowers, saying that they will always support her. Nancy is deeply moved. She has finally gained her very first fan in her life. When the man hears a girl singing on the radio, he immediately turns up the volume and listens carefully. In that moment, tears well up in John's eyes. He is absolutely certain that it's the voice of his younger sister, whom he hasn't seen in 4 years. He immediately orders his men to investigate the singer, and the results come back quickly. John then goes to see his sister, but just as he's about to ring the doorbell, he suddenly sees her walking out with a child. Startled, he quickly hides to the side. After they leave, he cautiously peeks out to watch them. Looking at the two figures, one big and one small, walking away, John realizes what's happened. His worst fear has come true. His sister has secretly given birth to the child of the man who killed their father. Unwilling to accept it, he follows them, thinking it might be someone else's child, until he hears the little boy call Nancy mom. At that moment, John's eyes are filled with pain. He returns to his car in a daze and finally breaks down, sobbing uncontrollably. All these years, he has never forgotten the moment his father was murdered by Zhao Boyan right in front of him. He endured humiliation and stayed by Zhao Boyan's side, waiting for a chance to take revenge, living every second in the agony of hatred. But now, the sister he cherishes more than anything has given birth to a son for the man who killed their father. How could he possibly accept this? Yet on second thought, the child is innocent, and after all, he is still his sister's child. The next day, Yoo is sitting alone on the stairs, quietly reading a storybook, when John comes to find her. Seeing her innocent, adorable face, a gentle smile appears on his own. He walks over and sits beside her, trying to get close, but having never even been in a relationship, he has no idea how to interact with a child. He asks her why she isn't playing with the other kids, but Yoo only glances at him before lowering her head again. John then points at the lion in her storybook and asks if she recognizes it. Just as John feels happy that Yoo is finally responding to him, a teacher comes over, and he has no choice but to stand up and step aside. He watches her leave with reluctance, and at that moment, Yoo turns back to look at him. Perhaps because of their blood connection, she seems to like him too, waving her little hand to say goodbye. The girl arrives at a TV station to participate in a highly anticipated music show, but a curly-haired female artist immediately grows jealous when she sees that Nancy is a newcomer and prettier than her. She criticizes Nancy for selling records on the street, saying it embarrasses singers like them. Then she questions how Nancy even got into the station, implying that besides selling records, she must be selling something else too. Even if Nancy were naive, she can tell the woman is targeting her. She immediately calls her out by name and loudly warns her. The curly-haired woman didn't expect Nancy to talk back like that and instantly stands up, daring her to say it again. Enraged and humiliated, the curly-haired woman lunges at Nancy to hit her. Nancy forcefully shakes off her hand and tells her she's good at fighting, warning that if she doesn't want to embarrass herself, she'd better stop provoking her. The curly-haired woman backs down on the spot, but she holds a grudge against Nancy. Taking advantage of a moment when no one is around, she sneaks into the wardrobe room and starts rummaging through the racks. She finally finds Nancy's Nancy's stage outfit, pulls out a blade, and cuts it up. Soon after, Nancy discovers her outfit has been slashed, leaving her extremely anxious. She only brought that one outfit, and the show is about to start. There's no way she'll have time to find another one now. When Boss Lou arrives and sees the outfit ruined like this, he's furious. Just as everyone is at a loss, the curly-haired woman walks out of the makeup room and deliberately turns back to give Nancy a provocative smile, as if to say this is what happens when you cross her. Nancy feels both angry and helpless. With no other choice, Boss Lou tells the manager to use safety pins to hold the outfit together and instructs Nancy not to dance on stage just to get through the performance somehow. At the same time, Mingyu's secretary rushes into his office and tells him they've found Nancy. Mingyu immediately jumps to his feet in excitement. The secretary hands him Nancy's record and explains that Cha Soo-young is actually Nancy. There's a music show at the TV station at 4 p.m. today, and Nancy will be performing there. Overwhelmed with excitement, Mingyu sets off for the station right away. Meanwhile, completely unaware of all this, Nancy is making her final preparations before going on stage. She keeps telling herself not to be nervous, but her hand trembles uncontrollably as she applies lipstick. Seeing this, Boss Lou gently takes the lipstick from her and carefully helps touch up her makeup himself. It was the girl's first time on a music talent show. The eyes of thousands of audience members were all fixed on Nancy, but she stood on stage frozen in place, her right hand unconsciously reaching for the spot where her dress was held together by a safety pin. Meanwhile, the girl with curly hair stood below the stage with a smug look on her face, waiting to see Nancy make a fool of herself. Although Nancy had already minimized her dance moves, she knew the costume wouldn't hold up for long. Plus, she was performing a dance track. If she just sang without dancing, she'd never stand out among the many contestants. So, on a whim, she signaled to a crew member. As smoke billowed onto the stage, she yanked the performance outfit off her body. The atmosphere in the venue instantly ignited, and the show's impact reached its peak, as if the entire sequence had been planned from the start. Nancy delivered a spectacular performance to the audience, and the show was a resounding success. There was no doubt that after today, Nancy would skyrocket to superstardom in the music industry. The audience's applause was unprecedentedly enthusiastic. Mrs. Hong couldn't help but weep with joy, while her two older brothers and Mr. Liu were all immensely proud of Nancy. Seeing that she had failed to achieve her goal, the woman with curly hair turned and stormed off in anger. Meanwhile, Mingyu's eyes were already brimming with tears. He had searched desperately for Nancy for 4 years, and now he had finally seen the face he had longed for day and night. So, as soon as the performance ended, Mingyu, led by security, rushed to find Nancy in the dressing room. Her friends, sensing the moment, tactfully left the room, leaving the space to the two of them. Mingyu pulled Nancy into his arms and poured out his longing for her. A flicker of conflict crossed Nancy's eyes. She desperately wanted time to stand still in that moment, but because of the murder of her father, she and Mingyu were destined never to be together. So she broke free from his embrace and coldly told him that she no longer loved him, hoping he would stop disturbing her. When Nancy returned to the company from the TV station, she immediately spotted her two older brothers waiting there. The three siblings were finally reunited. To celebrate their reunion, Alex gave Nancy an apartment. In fact, he had wanted to give it to her long ago, but he had been unable to find her. Looking at the home her two brothers had decorated so warmly, Nancy's heart was filled with emotion. Yet Nancy felt unworthy of such a gift, believing she had let her two brothers down. But since she was their only sister, how could Alex and Leo possibly hold it against her? The three siblings sat together drinking, and during the gathering, Alex mentioned their youngest brother. It was then that Nancy learned that after being adopted abroad, he had been abandoned and subsequently adopted into another country, so there had been no news of him to this day. This news weighed heavily on all three of them, so the eldest brother, in an effort to lighten the mood, got up, turned on the stereo, and began dancing. A rookie female singer lands her first endorsement deal and, out of gratitude, goes to a restaurant for a business dinner. But to her shock, the person who shows up is her ex-boyfriend, the one she dumped 4 years ago. Mingyu ignores Nancy's surprise, walks over, and sits down at the table. Thinking he's there to cause trouble, Nancy immediately tries to drive him away. But Mingyu tells her that he's actually the person she's been waiting for. That's when Nancy realizes she's been tricked. Ever since their brief encounter the last time, Mingyu hasn't been able to get Nancy out of his mind. He's determined to get back together with her, but Nancy keeps avoiding him. So the very next day, Mingyu sends his secretary to track down Nancy's manager, offering him a generous sum of money to buy him off. Behind Nancy's back, the manager signs a contract, making Nancy the spokesperson for Wonbao Construction. Mingyu specifically instructs that Nancy must not be told that the deal is with Wonbao Construction. Blinded by the money, the manager immediately agrees and rushes back to the company, excitedly telling Nancy that someone wants her for a commercial shoot. Just like that, under her manager's persuasion, Nancy unknowingly becomes the spokesperson for Wonbao Construction. Once Mingyu learns that everything is set, he has his secretary, posing as the brand, invite Nancy to meet at Han River Restaurant. This finally gives him a chance to be alone with her. Realizing she's been deceived, Nancy grabs her bag and immediately tries to leave. But Mingyu isn't about to let her go so easily. He points out that the contract clearly states she must comply with all of the brand's requirements, or it will count as a breach, and she'll have to pay triple damages. Furious, Nancy lashes out, calling Mingyu shameless and despicable. With no other choice, Nancy sits down and eats the meal with him. Afterward, she heads to the underground parking garage, barely holding back her anger. The moment she gets into her car, she calls her manager and demands to know why he lied. Wasn't Wonbao Construction the one who hired her for the ad? The manager hurriedly makes an excuse, claiming he must have remembered the company name wrong. Nancy doesn't believe him at all, but at this point, blaming him won't change anything, so she goes home and carefully reviews the contract again. When she sees that the penalty clause is indeed enforceable, she's so angry she could drag her manager over and beat him up. Just as she's trying to figure out what to do, the doorbell suddenly rings. She quickly hides the contract in a drawer beside the couch before going to open the door. door. John and Alex show up with Nancy's favorite roots and fried chicken. The arrival of her 2 older brothers lifts Nancy's mood, and she even jokes about when they're going to get married. When the topic turns to relationships, Alex asks if Mingyu has tried to contact her again. Nancy instinctively denies it. Only then does Alex relax. He's worried his sister might soften and get back together with Mingyu. He tells her that if anything happens, she has to tell them, and he and their older brother will do everything they can to help. Touched, Nancy smiles and nods, saying she will. After getting off work, the girl returns home, only to find her ex-boyfriend of 4 years sitting drunk outside her door the moment she steps out of the elevator. She sighs helplessly and scolds Mingyu, telling him to leave immediately, then takes out her keys to unlock the door. Nancy's cold attitude fills Mingyu with a deep sense of helplessness and pain. He slowly gets up from the ground, about to leave, but after sitting there for so long, his legs give out and he nearly falls. Fortunately, Nancy reacts quickly and catches him. At that moment, Mingyu can no longer hold back his emotions. He pulls Nancy into his arms, repeatedly calling her name. Ignoring her struggle, he forcefully kisses her. In that moment, Nancy wants more than anything to let go of the grudge over her father's death and be with Mingyu without hesitation. But she knows she can't, so she pushes him away with all her strength. Without another word, she opens the door and goes inside. But as the door closes, Nancy can no longer hold back her tears. The next day, Nancy throws herself into taking on endorsement deals, trying to earn the remaining penalty as quickly as possible so she can completely cut ties with Mingyu. But even at the fastest pace, it will take at least a week to gather enough money. That means for the next week, she is still the spokesperson for Wonbao Construction and must follow Mingyu's demands. Sure enough, the moment she returns to the office, she finds Mingyu's secretary already waiting for her. Using the excuse that the matter isn't finished and she must fulfill the contract, he insists that she attend Wonbao Construction's advertising meeting that day. When Nancy shows reluctance, he directly threatens her, saying the ads will be launched soon, and if any losses occur because of her, it won't just be about paying the penalty, the company will demand even more compensation. Left with no choice, Nancy reluctantly follows the secretary to Wonbao Construction. After they enter the company, they happen to run into Mingyu waiting for the elevator. With a cold expression, he doesn't even look at Nancy. When Nancy asks to speak with him privately, he refuses. Yet despite putting on an indifferent front, Mingyu can't help but glance at Nancy during the meeting, even unconsciously asking which advertising concept she prefers. When she says she likes manager Sue's design idea, Mingyu adopts it without hesitation. Afterward, he tells his secretary to make sure Nancy is safely escorted back to her company. But Nancy doesn't appreciate it. She simply says goodbye and leaves on her own. While going through some files, the man suddenly sees 2 photos slip out of a folder. He picks them up and freezes on the spot. They show his beloved girlfriend embracing another man, and that man is someone he hates. He breaks down and crumples the photos into a ball. At that moment, his secretary tells him that although it's still unclear whether Nancy and Alex are actually in a relationship, it's certain that the apartment Nancy is currently living in was bought for her by Alex. Also, Nancy's TV appearance was privately recommended by the deputy mayor of Seoul. The thought of the woman he loves being entangled with multiple men pushes Mingyu into a fit of rage. Meanwhile, completely unaware of all this, Nancy is discussing event-related matters with the deputy mayor. The deputy mayor has always liked Nancy, and since this is their first time meeting alone, he seems especially nervous. Trying to ease the awkwardness, he attempts to make conversation, but what comes out instead is that if Nancy feels bored, she can leave early and doesn't have to stay. Nancy smiles at this and doesn't leave. Instead, she sincerely thanks him for all the help he's given her recently. Receiving her appreciation, the deputy mayor becomes visibly happy, but starts stumbling over his words and acting flustered, even accidentally knocking over his glass of water. Nancy quickly takes out a handkerchief to help wipe the water off his clothes, but this exact moment is seen by Mingyu, who has come looking for her. He is furious, but doesn't dare offend the deputy mayor, so he suppresses his anger and pretends he heard the deputy mayor was there and came to say hello. The deputy mayor warmly invites Mingyu to sit down and have a drink. Mingyu's sudden appearance makes Nancy uneasy, so she makes up an excuse and leaves the room. But Mingyu follows her out, grabs her wrist, and forcibly pulls her into another room. He immediately demands to know why she has become so careless. The two break into a heated argument, which happens to be overheard by Alex passing by. He rushes into the room, and seeing his sister being bullied, Alex is instantly enraged. He steps forward and lands a heavy punch on Mingyu, who refuses to back down and quickly punches him back. The two start fighting on the spot. But Mingyu, who has been pampered all his life, is no match for Alex. He is gradually overpowered and forced backward. Terrified, Nancy keeps shouting for them to stop, but neither of them listens. Seeing this, Nancy rushes forward and grabs her brother, begging him to stop and let her handle it herself. Alex finally backs off, but Mingyu gets up and angrily demands to know what kind of relationship Alex and Nancy have. Alex answers that Nancy is his sister. Nancy quickly steps in to stop him, hoping her brother will let her personally tell Mingyu the truth. Alex lets out a deep sigh and warns Mingyu not to come near Nancy again or he will kill him, before turning and walking out to wait for her. Only then does Nancy finally explain to Mingyu why they can't be together. While washing his hands in the restroom, the man suddenly feels a small hand tugging at the corner of his clothes. He turns his head in confusion and sees a little boy standing there with his arms open, clearly asking to be picked up. Mingyu impatiently asks what he wants. Although reluctant at first, he can't bring himself to refuse when he sees how adorable the boy is, so he steps forward, picks him up, and helps him wash his hands. After coming out of the restroom, the two stand side by side drying their hands. The scene is quite amusing, because whether it's the way they dry their hands or fold their handkerchiefs, their movements are exactly the same. Even when putting the handkerchief away, both of them instinctively place it into their right pocket. Watching the boy walk away, Mingyu feels an inexplicable sense of warmth and unconsciously reveals a doting smile. What he doesn't know is that this little boy is actually the son his ex-girlfriend secretly gave birth to after they broke up 4 years ago. A few days later, when Mingyu goes to the hospital hospital again to handle his mother's discharge paperwork, he unexpectedly runs into Yoo once more. At that moment, Yoo's toy has been taken by another child. He asks for it back, but the other child ignores him. As soon as Yoo spots Mingyu, he immediately walks over and tugs on his pants again. Mingyu takes him over to reason with the other child and helps him get his toy back. After getting it back, Yoo is overjoyed and thanks Mingyu. This scene happens to be witnessed by Nancy, who has come looking for her son. She knows that even though Yoo doesn't say it out loud, he deeply longs for a father. In her eyes, this moment between father and son might be their last chance to interact, so she chooses not to interrupt. Just then, Yoo suddenly spots his mother. Nancy panics and quickly hides behind a wall, so when Mingyu looks over, he doesn't see her. His gaze lingers in the direction where Yoo leaves, a trace of reluctance in his eyes. Meanwhile, Nancy believes she's hidden well, completely forgetting that she is now a popular singer. Sure enough, the very next day, as soon as Nancy arrives at the company, reporters show up at the door. The manager assumes they're there for an interview and signals Nancy to go inside first, then turns to tell the reporters they're not accepting interviews for now and prepares to leave. But the reporter's next words make him stop in his tracks. Naturally, the news quickly reaches Boss Loo, who flies into a rage. The man suddenly learns that the little boy in front of him is the child his ex-girlfriend secretly gave birth to after they broke up 4 years ago. He suspects the child might be his son. When he takes a closer look at the boy's face, he realizes it's the same child he had run into twice by chance just a few days earlier. Thinking back to how the boy washed his hands in exactly the same way he does, with the same habits, Mingyu becomes even more convinced of his suspicion. He immediately instructs his secretary to create an opportunity, under the company's name, to sponsor the kindergarten Yoo attends. He wants to get closer to Yoo and take a better look. On the way back to the company, Mingyu suddenly remembers that the news about Nancy having an illegitimate child was uncovered by a reporter. If that reporter exposes the story, not only will Nancy's singing career come to a halt, but Yoo will also be dragged into a public scandal. He knows he has to protect both of them, so he has his secretary bring the reporter in and directly asks how he plans to handle the situation. The reporter doesn't hide anything and says he intends to continue investigating and then release everything at once. Mingyu bluntly tells him that if the report damages Nancy's public image and affects his project, the massive financial losses caused to his company will be his responsibility. The reporter is instantly shocked. The secretary then pulls out an envelope full of cash and warns the reporter to stop while he still can, or face the consequences. The reporter is unwilling. After all, he worked hard to uncover such an exclusive story, and giving it up now would be a huge loss. But he's just a small-time reporter. How could he possibly go up against someone as powerful and influential as Mingyu? In the end, he has no choice but to give in. Meanwhile, completely unaware of what's happened, Boss Loo and the others are still worried about the situation. They try multiple times to contact the reporter to talk things through, but he refuses to meet. After a lot of effort, the manager finally manages to bring the reporter to Boss Loo's club that evening. But before Boss Loo can even say anything, the reporter speaks first, saying he won't publish the story after all. His sudden change of attitude leaves both Boss Loo and Nancy confused, but since the issue is resolved, they don't dwell on it any further.